Alright, hi. So today's video is pretty important because, well, it's that time of the month again. We're going to go over the current makeup of the federal government as of March 2026. Late March of 2026, I should say. So I'm going to kind of briefly go over each branch of government in terms of where we currently stand. And there have been a lot of changes in the legislative, of course, and the executive branch. So, yeah, there's been some changes there. Unless if you've been following me on some of the more recent posts I've been making, uh, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So, we're going to kind of talk about the legislative branch with Congress. We're currently in the 119th Congress still. We're in the second session, and as you are well aware, midterms are this year. So go vote in your primaries and go vote in these, general election. Whether or not if the SAVE Act actually passes in the Senate. And speaking of the Senate, we're just going to jump right into the Senate. As of Tuesday, March 24th of this year, the Senate is currently made up of 53 Republicans, 45 Democrats, 2 independents, and no vacancies. As a reminder, the president of the Senate is the vice president, and their only duty is to be the presiding officer, break all ties, in the Senate, and of course to swear in new senators, unless they shall devolve the power upon someone else. More than likely, the president pro tempore, who is currently held by Republican Chuck Grassley of Iowa, who, by the way, is 95 years old. Yeah. So basically, the PPT is the most senior member of the majority party with the longest amount of service. It's more of like a honorary title more than anything, although there are some powers that he or she has, but that's a story for another time. The majority leader is currently Republican John Thune of South Dakota. The minority leader is Democrat Chuck Schumer of New York. And like how I mentioned, there are no vacancies. However, there are 2 special elections and 1 actual regular election for 3 different Senate seats. These special elections are held for Ohio 3 and Florida 3, with the appointed incumbents running for re-election to finish the term of their predecessors of J.D. Vance of Ohio to be vice president and Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State. Now, Oklahoma, this is where the main change in the Senate is, because usually not a lot of changes happen in the makeup of the Senate. The senator who had the Oklahoma Class 2 seat, which, by the way, all senators are split up evenly as possible into 3 classes. Each state either has a Class 1 and Class 2 senator, a Class 2, Class 3 senator, or in the case of Ohio, a Class 1 and 3 senator. So Oklahoma has a Class 2 senator that had to resign in order to become the next Secretary of Homeland Security. We'll talk more about that a little later. And, well, that senator had to resign, and the temporary appointment by the governor of Oklahoma is Alan Armstrong. And just a little background on him: he is a Republican, and this is so far his only political office he's ever had. And the guy is 63 years old. So, yeah, there's that. Over in the House of Representatives, as of Monday, March 9th of this year, we currently have 217 Republicans 214 Democrats, 1 independent, and 3 vacancies. Yeah, that independent is the main change in the House, but there are some other things we need to go over. The Speaker is Republican Mike Johnson of Louisiana's 4th District. The Majority Leader is Republican Steve Scalise, also from Louisiana, but of the 1st Congressional District. And the Minority Leader is Democrat Hakeem Jeffries of New York's 8th District, which is pretty much just a suburb of New York City. I don't remember where we're at, but it's somewhere in New York. Anyways, moving on. Now, up to 3 vacant seats. There are technically 3 special elections in each one. One of them technically occurred and has a runoff coming up. So we're going to start with that one. Georgia 14, which was the seat held by Marjorie Taylor Greene. She had to resign due to her fallout against President Trump with the Epstein files. And so, according to the state, they had a nonpartisan primary occur where, all the candidates go up against each other, and no one will be duly elected until they have 50% plus 1 of the votes. Nobody did, so therefore the top 2 move on to a runoff. And we have a Democrat, Sean Harris, and Republican Clayton Fuller going into the runoff scheduled for Tuesday, April 7th, which is in probably about 10 days from now or so. And the funny thing is, when it comes to the actual number of votes of the first round of election of the primary, the Democrat, Sean Harris, technically got the most. 37.34% of the votes. Or 37.34% of the votes, sorry. The top Republican, Clayton Fuller, who was backed by Trump, got 34.87% of the votes. But both will go up against each other in the runoff in about 10 days' time. The next one, New Jersey 11. The incumbent, Mickey Sherrill, had to resign in order to become the next governor of New Jersey. And so, a special election is being held on April 16th. And that is a Thursday. So, stay tuned for more about that one later on. And in California's 1st District, the incumbent, Doug LaMalfa, died. And a special election will be happening in a nonpartisan primary once again, because a lot of states have it like that for some reason, but it is what it is. That election will be taking place on, ironically, my birthday this year, Tuesday, June 2nd. More information on that will be posted later. Now, of the independent, it actually came from a California Republican. The current holder of the seat for California's 3rd District, Kevin Kiley, switched party from being a Republican to an independent. But he has stated that he will still clause with the Republicans just to get stuff passed. But even though with the independent representative in the House, the Republicans will still have the majority, because based on the current enumeration of having 432 members, half plus 1 is technically 217. So they can technically afford to lose 1 vote, which almost always is Kentucky Republican Thomas Massie, but that's a story for another day. So anyway, that is the legislative branch and current Congress. Okay, now we go over the executive branch with the presidential line of succession, like how we always do it. And, we'll have the full list of the, line of succession from the president all the way to the Secretary of Homeland Security, and always have the Chief Justice in there for fun. And I'll also say what number they are and what party, when they first got that office, in their current state, whatever, so forth. So, President of the United States, still Trump, obviously. He's number 47 for this iteration, in office since January 20th last year. Also on January 20th of last year, Vice President J.D. Vance, Republican, obviously. And just to make note, once again, every single current office holder in this line of succession, except for the Secretary of Health and Human Services and Chief Justice, are all Republican. We're all aware of that. But anyways, moving on. J.D. Vance is number 50, been in office since January 20th of last year. Speaker of the House, as mentioned in the last section, it is Republican Mike Johnson. He is number 65, and he's been in office since October 25th of 2023, just shortly after they historically ousted Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker. Yeah, remember that? President pro tempore is still Senator Chuck Grassley. He is number 127, and he's been in office since January 3rd of last year. Secretary of State, number 72, Marco Rubio, since the 21st of January of last year. Secretary of Treasury, number 79, Scott Bessent, on the 28th of January of last year. Secretary of Defense, we have number 29, Pete Hegseth, since the 25th of January of last year. Attorney General, it is number 87, Pam Bondi. She's been in office since the 5th of February of last year. Secretary of the Interior, we have number 55, Doug Burgum, since the 1st of February of last year. Secretary of Agriculture, we have number 33, Brooke Rollins, since the 13th of February of last year. Secretary of Commerce, we have number 41, Howard Lutnick, since the 21st of February of last year. Secretary of Labor, we have number 30, Lori Chavez DeRemer, since the 11th of March of last year. Health and Human Services, we have number 26, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is an independent since the 13th of February of last year. Housing and Urban Development, we have number 19, Scott Turner, since the 5th of February of last year. Secretary of Transportation, we have number 20, Sean Duffy, since the 28th of January of last year. Energy, we have number 17, Chris Wright, since the 4th of February of last year. Education, we have number 13, Linda McMahon, since the 3rd of March of last year. Veterans Affairs, we have number 12, Doug Collins, since the 5th of February of last year. Homeland Security. Now, this is where the major change happened, because like how I kind of mentioned before in a previous video, former Senator of Oklahoma in class number 2, which is where Alan Armstrong got put into the Senate to serve for the rest of the term, was confirmed by the Senate to become the next Secretary of Homeland Security. Now, I am going to kind of briefly pull up the vote of it because I made a Facebook post about it on the day of. I'm trying to remember where exactly it is. See if I can find it here. Oh, here it is. Okay, so his confirmation vote was 54-45, and he was confirmed as a simple majority, and he is now number 9 since the 23rd of March of this year. So yeah, he is the newest Secretary of Homeland Security after Kristi Noem was ousted earlier this month. And obviously, as always, just for fun, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, it is still number 17, John Roberts, who's been in office since the 29th of September in 2005. Yeah, he's been in office for over 20 years. And if you want to learn more about him, we actually did a video of him all the way back in, oh God, when was that? 2020? Yeah, somewhere around then. It's been a long time since we did anything about that. But yeah, that is the current line of succession for the president for the executive branch. And speaking of Chief Justice John Roberts, we're going to talk about the Supreme Court now. Now, there are obviously no changes here. There hasn't been really any change to the Supreme Court since late June of 2022. But as always, we still go over it just to, just as a refresher for you guys. So, starting with the Chief Justice and then going in order by seniority. Chief Justice it is obviously John Roberts. He was appointed by George W. Bush with a confirmation vote of 78-22, and he began his term on the 29th of September of 2005. And now from here on out, we're going by seniority. Up next, Clarence Thomas, appointed by George H.W. Bush, or Bush Sr. The confirmation vote was 52-48. And he began his term on the 23rd of October of 1991. Up next, Samuel Alito, appointed by George W. Bush, or as we call George W., or Bush Jr., with a confirmation vote of 58-42. And he began his term on the 31st of January of 2006. So he has also passed the 20-year threshold. Up next, we have Sonia Sotomayor, appointed by Barack Obama, with a confirmation vote of 68-31, and she began her term on the 8th of August of 2009. Up next, Elena Kagan, also appointed by Barack Obama, a confirmation vote of 63-37, and she began her term on the 7th of August of 2010. Up next, we have Neil Gorsuch, appointed by Donald Trump, with a vote of 54-45, and he began his term on the 10th of April 2017. Up next, we have Brett Kavanaugh, who was appointed by Donald Trump with a vote of 50-48, and he began his term on the 8th of October of 2018. Up next, we have Amy Coney Barrett, appointed also by Donald Trump. Yeah, remember when all these guys were appointed by Trump? With a confirmation vote of 52-48, and she began her term on the 27th of October of 2020. And most recently, Ketanji Brown Jackson, appointed by Joe Biden, with a confirmation vote of 53-47, and she began her term on the 30th of June of 2022. Alright, so that is all we have for today. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned on Monday for a new episode of our Greatest Extent series. And we'll return back to this in June at some point. I don't remember when exactly, but I have all the dates written down for all my Q&As and for videos like this for the year. And I can't remember where I put that piece of paper. But we'll see you next time when I do one of these in June. And stay tuned for our next episode of my Greatest Extent series on Monday. We'll see you then.